Welcome to the Executive Innovation Show podcast, where we bring you real executive conversations with industry game changers and thought leaders. We ask the questions you're thinking, what you're scared to ask, and we make your brain hurt afterward. With your host, Carrie Chitsey Wells, co-founder and CEO of One Touch Video Chat, live video interviews, and the nonprofit Humans Helping Humans.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's podcast. We have an amazing podcast today. We're going to be talking about breaking down the mental health stigma walls brick by brick. And we have two amazing women on the show today. They're going to be talking about really breaking down the walls in mental health stigma. And not only do they have personal stories to share, not only are they passionate about it because of their backgrounds, but they're actually out there doing something about it through awareness, through nonprofits. And so I'm so happy to have with me the first guest on the show, Michelle Dickinson. She's the author of the book, Breaking Into My Life, about growing up with a bipolar parent and her battle to reclaim herself. She also manages the social media and is a moderator for the nonprofit 18%. And so happy to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, Carrie.
Well, you wrote a book really super awesome about really sharing your experiences of your childhood, of being a caregiver to your mom who was diagnosed bipolar. What was it like growing up with a parent with a mental illness? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, it was challenging to say the least. I mean, Mom had bipolar disorder probably since I was the age of 4 or 5. She had been in and out of hospitals like throughout my life, I'd say at least a half dozen times. She would go through typical highs and lows associated with bipolar disorder. And when she had her mania, that was actually the good stuff because it would like temporarily suspend her crying unconsolably or, being verbally or physically or emotionally abusive. And during those times, she was actually like happy, and I would get like this glimpse into the mom that she was before she was sick. And I'd really just try to savor that. When she had her darker moments of time, right before she was being hospitalized, she would typically be just too fragile to be left alone. And that was when I really played that role of the child caregiver. My father oftentimes would ask me to just stay with her because she couldn't be alone, and yet she wasn't sick enough to be placed in the hospital. So I would just stay home from school, and I would just be with her. And there's nothing more paralyzing than being with someone who's so sad and there's just nothing you can do to help them. That for me was super hard. So, so that whole experience was hard, but I have to tell you, I truly emerged from that. And I really feel like I've been empowered by my experience, which is why I wanted to write the book.
Yeah, it's so great. And so great for you to, share your story and help other people and kids that are, dealing with it. You have a lot of really great topics and ideas and all kinds of stuff. And one of the things that stood out with me, and I don't know why, I think it's because we've been talking about the stigma so much lately, but you share a story in the book about getting a pedicure and hearing, some ladies from the neighborhood or whatever talking about your mother's mental illness. And it really just hit me as just, mental health is health, right? And the stigma, around that. Tell me a little bit about, that and a bit about kind of dealing with that stigma and, I guess that kind of that ridicule. And then you're doing some amazing things on, helping change the stigma around mental health. So tell me a little bit about that and really kind of, how that's changed.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, the thing when I was growing up was I was really afraid. I didn't want anyone to know that my mother was sick because there was always that, fear of being judged, fear of being made fun of.
Right.
The pedicure story I think that you're referring to was one where I remember sitting in a pedicure chair right around the time I was writing the book, actually. and it really pissed me off. I'm sitting in the pedicure chair, and there's these two women, and they're talking about a work experience, and they just throw around the term bipolar. They were like, yeah, he was like bipolar. And the thing that really irritated me was it was such a careless use of that word, because all they were talking about was how the guy at work had a mood swing. Oh. And that to me was like, therein lies the problem. We create our reality by the language that we use, that we choose to speak. And that's why I think language is so important when it comes to removing the mental health stigma. Growing up with a situation where I know firsthand what bipolar disorder looks like, mm-hmm. and then to hear someone throwing that around, I was like, goodness, this is, we have to do a better job, and people need to be more responsible with really what they're saying, what terms they're using. And the other part about language is I believe in my heart that stigma can't live where there's open dialogue. And I think it lives when there's ignorance. And so if you have no relationship to mental illness, of course it's easy for you to throw around a term like that. But, my goal with my book and my story is ultimately to raise this whole conversation about mental health and cause more open conversation so that people have a shift to how they relate to brain health overall.
Right.
And I wanted to write the book to humanize mental illness. Mm-hmm. This is my lived experience. If I humanize it, then people might start to understand it and fear it less.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think going back, obviously our audience isn't a bunch of kids, but, kind of putting my parent hat on for a second, a couple of the things that you shared really resonated with me of, what you went through and some of the, call it trauma or whatever you want to call it. Now you went through as a kid just by kind of feeling like, if your dad says, hey, if you behave better, your mom might not be sick. And you had no control over, what your mom was going through. But, what advice do you have for, kind of children dealing with a parent that has mental illness? I think you had some really good advice around that.
Yeah, this advice would go to children and adults alike, because obviously, I grew up in the 80s. The conversation about mental health was not nearly as progressed as it is now. Right. So I think people are looking out for the child that's, sad or not doing well in school. I think, they're less liable to get lost. But my advice to children and adults who have a loved one that's struggling with a mental illness is to just make sure that you don't get lost in caring for them. It's very, very easy. As I got older, I was still looking after my mother, but I had to learn to, find my own support mechanisms to get myself the support that I needed, to create healthy boundaries, and then find ways to stay empowered. When I was a child, I had the secret that I didn't want to tell anyone, but then I was able to find support in my church youth group with a group of kids that I felt safe with, that I could talk to. And that support system was invaluable. So I would say, don't get lost in caring for your loved one. Find the support you need, someone safe to talk to. And, then you'll be able to support your loved one to the best of your ability.
Yeah, I think that positive community is critical. And, whether it's mental illness or addiction, whatever it is, I think, that's just critical in having that positive support system that's uplifting and not shaming or downlifting, going through, mental illness as well as addiction. We talk about that all the time, how critical that is, both in someone who has mental illness or addiction issues and someone that's dealing with a loved one. It just makes all the difference in the world to be a part of a positive community.
Right.
So you've written the book, you work with 18%, you're, making impacts in multiple areas, crystal ball, everything aligns in Michelle's way and you kind of have, your goals and mission come true. How does mental health awareness look differently 5 years from now?
Sure. Carrie, I want to answer that question, but I do want to mention really quick 18%, since you just mentioned it again. So I just want to mention, the conversation part is so important. And there's a lot of times when people feel like they have a mental illness or they have a loved one and they don't know where to go. They don't feel comfortable calling a doctor. They don't have a friend. So I want to mention 18% because I believe in it in my heart.
Absolutely.
The power of conversations. It's 18% is a free virtual online peer-to-peer mental health community. And it's named for the 18% of Americans who are dealing with mental health issues. It's one of those safe and supportive communities that users can connect and really understand, what other people are dealing with that they may be struggling with themselves. If they are just looking for someone to talk to, they can do that anonymously. You can log in. There's subgroups from eating disorders to depression to family support, and it can be found at www.18%.org. And I can't thank Zach and David enough for creating this, because I do believe it's a space where people who are suffering can really get the support they need. But I want to answer your question. And in 5 years, I'm thinking big things are going to happen because of people doing great work like you and all these other nonprofits.
Yeah.
So where mental illness is talked about openly, I feel like in 5 years, we hopefully are going to be talking about it before we lose more life to suicide. I mean, ultimately, that's what's at stake here is suicide and the loss of precious lives. I look forward to a day where we relate to brain health like we relate to heart disease.
Absolutely.
And we're talking about it and we're strategizing treatment options just like we would, the brain, just like we would when it comes to heart disease. Personally, my crusade is to help our youth. Yep. I want to talk to more kids because I want them to be comfortable talking about brain health, just like they talk about their physical health, and that they own how they're feeling and don't have any hesitation to raise their hands if they feel like they need help. I think that would be truly an incredible world to live in.
Yeah, no doubt. And Zach's going to be coming on this show here in a couple of weeks. And, we're all in this kind of mental health nonprofit community helping each other out. So it's 18 and it's percent spelled out. So it's 18%.org. A lot of amazing things there. There's a lot of awesome nonprofit mental health folks that are. The one thing that I'll say is the awesomest thing about having a nonprofit in mental health is everybody is truly trying to work together. Like there's no egos. There's no I'm doing this and you're doing that. Everybody is clearly trying to make a difference and work together, which is very different than I've ever seen. Most everybody, is in the corporate world or is doing, a full-time job doing something else, and everybody's has a personal story, has a reason that they're passionate about it. And it's been so great to, meet so many amazing people that all have the same mission to, tear down the walls brick by brick and really impact the youth. And you're talking about a bunch of, 30 and 40-year-olds probably. I'm not stereotyping all of our ages, but you're talking about a bunch of folks that are, really passionate about causing change. And I think that, we can't, I think none of us want to sit around and wait for others. To your point, we're huge on youth suicide prevention. And, I say it all the time that, social media is killing our generations of the highlight reel and really causing, more and more issues of, depression, anxiety. And, as parents, we have to want to talk to our kids about it and let them know it's okay to talk to it. But not every parent wants to have that conversation. And, a lot of schools don't want to get involved. And so, we have to do as much as we can to try to impact change from all sides. Yeah, it's a great team to be on with so many people, like you said, in this world of wanting to cause change. I love it. I think it's so unique and so special, and together we're going to cause that change. Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Well, Michelle, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. Please click in the link of the show notes and check out Michelle's book. Also, we'll have a link to 18%. Feel free, if you know anybody that is struggling with depression, anxiety, or you want to share it, feel free to go there and check out all the different groups that are going on there, free service. Michelle, look so forward to impacting change with you in 2019 and beyond. And thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Carrie.
Well, it was so great having Michelle on the show. And next up on the show, we have Courtney Blanton, the founder of Hi, How Are You Project, a nonprofit inspiring new conversations about mental health. And Courtney is based here in Austin, Texas as well. Courtney, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, awesome. Courtney, your story is very relatable to a lot of people, of why they've gotten involved in nonprofits, why they're trying to raise awareness for, mental health in general. Tell everybody why you started the Hi, How Are You project, and a little bit about your background.
Okay. Well, it's two-part. I am a co-founder, and so my story is different from my other co. I'll start with him first. Tom Gimbel is the CEO and general manager for Austin City Limits, and also the manager for the last 26 years of Daniel Johnston, who is the mural designer and artist of the Hi, How Are You mural that's here in Austin. That's very iconic. And he himself struggles with and has triumphed over mental health issues. And so we kind of decided to start the project because Hi, How Are You is an intro to a conversation. And then my story is personal. I've dealt with mental health issues my whole life since I was a kid, mostly due to the fact that I have autoimmune disorders, stomach issues, thyroid, and they're all related to depression and anxiety. Mm-hmm. So that's my motivation and the struggles that I've, overcome with the stigma and shame and, what I've dealt with, and then the way that I've educated myself. And I just want to make sure that we're getting the right information out to people and educating people about what, empowering people on how they can take control of what's going on with them.
Yeah. And that's great. And, I think a lot of people, go through internal struggles on mental health and, shame and fear and acceptance of,
Mm-hmm.
not wanting to tell others. And I know a lot of us that are working in this, trying to bring down the stigmas of mental health and increase the awareness, is really normalizing kind of the depression, anxiety. Yep. How do we really, there's a lot of, amazing nonprofits doing amazing things, but just in general, how do we increase the awareness? I mean, obviously with, the name of your nonprofit, we could probably talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. It is the reason that we started with music, and we started with Tom because Tom is very well connected in the entertainment industry, and we decided to use the entertainment industry as as a foundation, if you will, for awareness, because I think we've got a lot of young people that are committing suicide and struggling with their own mental health, and certainly adults. So we wanted to start from an angle of let's get their attention first. Let's do concerts and let's do events and let's really make the frog synonymous with mental health, especially as it is an icon to Austin. But it really is an icon in the world. I mean, we were in Australia and we showed the frog to someone, and they were like, "I know that frog." So it's it's awareness first, and then once we have their attention, we want to educate.
Yeah, and I think it brings up a good point. Starting with kind of the music and arts. I mean, it wasn't a day or two ago that everybody saw the Grammys and, how much nominations A Star Is Born. And, and if you haven't seen the movie, you should probably fast forward the podcast now. But, in Lady Gaga's speech, obviously she, hinted to a lot of mental health. And, as they pan the camera around, you have a lot of musicians who have been dealing with, their own mental health, or maybe were, scared to talk about it, but it comes out through their music and it connects to so many others through that music. Right. That I think, I know there's been a lot of press on A Star Is Born and a lot of people commenting on, it really helped them, vocalize their, depression issues or suicidal thoughts and things like that. How do you think that really connects when an event like that and, kind of a big movie and big musicians really get involved? I mean, obviously it helps, awareness from mental health, but how's that really, help from a musician standpoint?
It's awareness is awareness, but I think when you're, you're somebody like Lady Gaga or a musician, people tend to listen, or they're more interested. The way we want to go about it is to sort of make mental health cool, if you will,
right,
through music and entertainment. And A Star Is Born is a very sad story, but it's also it also tells a story, and so telling that story through the eyes of musicians and art, Daniel's art is certainly, if you're familiar with Daniel Johnston's art, it's all about what's going on in his head.
So talking a little bit about, for those that, are outside of Austin and may not be as familiar with Daniel's art, tell everybody a little bit about some of the murals and kind of, the story behind it, for those that, may not be tuned into, some of it as much as folks in Austin.
Sure. Daniel is not, certainly Daniel is not originally from Austin, but he is an Austin icon. He is underground famous, if you will. People like Beck and TV on the Radio and Flaming Lips. And so many bands have covered his music. So he's a singer-songwriter and has been since the 70s, and also a visual artist. Because of what he deals with his mental health, he does 4 to 6 pieces a day. It's which is
crazy,
mind-blowing. But the reason that one of the many reasons that Daniel became famous was sort of solidified in the 80s. I think it was 83 when Kurt Cobain wore his "Hi, How Are You" t-shirt on MTV Unplugged. And then he ended up wearing that same t-shirt at the MTV Music Awards. So there's some pretty famous pictures. That's kind of where Daniel was really born. In Austin, certainly the iconic mural of the frog with the "Hi, How Are You" above the frog is an important one here for us. But everywhere in the world, people hear his music. He was just on an international commercial for Apple. It was the #1 most Shazammed song for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So where, with the nonprofit and, ideal world of, where do you hope that we have mental health awareness and, 5 years from now, looking back, if, the Hi, How Are You project and just, trying to the goal of mental health awareness and breaking down the walls, what does that look like for you?
I think it's very close to what I personally deal with, and that's having this normal conversation about what mental health really is. It's not, it's not in your brain. There are chemicals in your brain that it does affect, but it's educating yourself. And I think the education is happening. I feel like we're on the precipice of something pretty significant as far as education around our own health. Like, what are we eating? What's causing us to, people don't know that serotonin is produced in the stomach, like just that information alone is so powerful to just disconnect that there's something mentally wrong with you. Like, you're crazy. There's really, it's all in your body. It's what you're feeding yourself. It's your environment. It's situational. There's a lot of, stressors out there, work stress, family stress, and that produces cortisol in the body, which does some really interesting things to your, chemistry in your brain and in your body. So I think it's, in 5 years from now, it's more of a kind of Whole Foods model, and not necessarily the store or the brand of Whole Foods, but it's really eating and realizing what we're putting into our bodies.
Right.
Supplements, food, alcohol.
Yep. Yeah, it's it's a spoke, right? There's all kinds of things that contribute, and I think, we talked a lot with Michelle before you got on, just about raising the awareness with the youth, and, really making sure that they know mental health is health, and raising awareness so people are comfortable talking about it. And so I know we're all trying to, especially I'm sure you guys with art and music, that's a great way to kind of open the avenue with the younger generation. Well, cool. Everybody go check out the Hi, How Are You project. It's hihowareyou.org. They've got a lot of amazing stuff going on, a lot of cool stuff that you can even purchase on the site, and follow Courtney and Tom and everybody else's kind of journey. And thanks so much, Courtney, for really helping out and, fighting the mental health fight.
Thank you for having me.
Well, this podcast has come to a close. If you have any questions for Michelle or Courtney, feel free to submit those. Please share the podcast, raise awareness for mental health. Subscribe to the show so you can get next week's nonprofit podcast right to your inbox. Thanks again for being on the show and tearing down the stigma.
This podcast has come to a close. To hear more from the Executive Innovation Show podcast, subscribe, submit questions, and share the love. Follow us on social. We're everywhere.